Billionaire Nathaniel Carter had everything: power, wealth, and a city at his feet. But when a simple letter from an 8-year-old boy lands on his desk, his world shifts forever. A plea for help, a chance at redemption, a family he never knew he needed. But is he willing to risk it all? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun glinted off the Thompson Tower, casting a golden glow over Nathaniel Carter's corner office. At 52, Nathaniel had everything money could buy. His Italian shoes cost more than most people's monthly rent. His watch could have paid for a college education. And the view from his office, it showcased a city where he owned more buildings than he could count on both hands. "Mr. Carter, your 9 o'clock is waiting," announced Jessica, his executive assistant, through the intercom. Nathaniel barely looked up from his computer screen. "Tell them 5 minutes." He returned his attention to the quarterly reports. The numbers were good, they were always good. That's what happened when you worked every day for 30 years, sacrificing everything else in your life. Jessica appeared at his door, hovering nervously. "Sir, there's also this." She approached his desk and placed a small white envelope beside his keyboard. Nathaniel frowned. "What is it?" "A letter, sir. It came through regular mail to the front desk. Security checked it. It's just paper." "Who sends letters anymore?" Nathaniel muttered, picking up the envelope with mild curiosity. His name was written in wobbly, childish handwriting. No return address. He opened it carefully and unfolded a piece of lined notebook paper. "Dear Mr. Carter," he read silently, "I need a new daddy. Mine died in an accident, and my mom and I are starving. She cries a lot, and she doesn't eat because she saves all the food for me. I don't need toys or money, just someone to help her smile again. Please, if you don't want to be my daddy, could you at least buy my mom some food? Love, Tommy?" Something shifted in Nathaniel's chest. His hands trembled slightly as he reread the letter. "Sir, are you okay?" Jessica's voice seemed to come from far away. Nathaniel cleared his throat. "Did this letter come with anything else? An address? Phone number?" "No, sir. Just the letter." Jessica paused. Though the front desk mentioned it was handed in by a woman who seemed, well, not well off, Nathaniel's mind raced. The board meeting, the investors waiting downstairs, the conference call with Tokyo, all of it suddenly seemed meaningless. "Cancel everything," he said abruptly. "Sir? Cancel my appointments, all of them, for today." He stood up, folding the letter carefully and placing it in his jacket pocket. "But the board..." "Tell them something came up. A family emergency." The irony of his words wasn't lost on him. Family emergency. He hadn't had a family since he was 10 years old, when the orphanage became his home after his parents died in that fire. "Where are you going?" Jessica asked, confusion written all over her face. Nathaniel grabbed his coat. "To find Tommy." The front desk security guard remembered more than Nathaniel had hoped. The woman who delivered the letter had been thin, almost frail. She wore a worn-out gray coat, and her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She had a slight limp. She'd mentioned something about the letter being her son's idea, not hers. She'd seemed embarrassed. Most importantly, the guard had seen her walking toward the bus stop on Pine Street. Nathaniel's driver maneuvered the sleek black car through downtown traffic, heading toward Pine Street. Nathaniel stared out the window, the letter burning a hole in his pocket. For the first time in years, he noticed the people on the sidewalks, really noticed them. How many were hungry? How many were one paycheck away from disaster? "Pull over," he ordered suddenly, spotting a grocery store. 20 minutes later, the back of his car was filled with bags of groceries. Bread, milk, eggs, fruit, vegetables, canned goods, cereal, juice, chicken, pasta. He'd grabbed anything. That looked substantial and nutritious. "The bus stop, sir?" his driver asked. Nathaniel nodded. It was a long shot, but maybe someone there had seen the woman. The bus stop yielded no immediate clues, but the coffee shop across the street did. The barista recognized the description of the woman. "Yeah, she comes in sometimes. Not to buy anything. We have a free water dispenser. Her name's Emma, I think. She's always polite, even though I can tell she's having a rough time. Sometimes she's with her little boy. Do you know where she lives?" Nathaniel asked, sliding a $100 bill across the counter. The barista hesitated. Look, I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I'm not here to cause trouble. The opposite, actually. Nathaniel showed her the letter. Her son wrote to me. I want to help. Something in his voice must have convinced her. There's an apartment building on Maple Street, the gray one with the broken steps. I've seen her go in there a few times. Just the apartment building on Maple Street looked nothing like the gleaming towers Nathaniel owned. The paint was peeling, the hallway smelled of mildew, and the elevator had an out-of-order sign that looked months old. Nathaniel climbed the stairs, his driver following with bags of groceries. On the third floor he stopped, realizing he had no idea which apartment to knock on. An elderly woman emerged from 3B, eyeing him suspiciously. "Excuse me," Nathaniel said. "I'm looking for Emma. She has a son named Tommy." "D," the woman replied after a moment. "But if you're from the landlord, you should be ashamed. That poor girl works 2 jobs and her boy's been sick." "I'm not from the landlord," Nathaniel assured her. "I'm a friend." The woman didn't look convinced, but returned to her apartment without further comment. Nathaniel approached 3D, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't since he made his first million. He knocked gently. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a small voice called out, "Who is it?" "My name is Nathaniel Carter. I got your letter, Tommy." Shuffling sounds came from behind the door. It opened a crack, and a small face peered out. The boy couldn't have been more than 8, with dark hair, and eyes too serious for his age. "You're Mr. Carter, the man from the big building." Nathaniel nodded. "That's me." Tommy's eyes widened. "Mom!" he called over his shoulder. "Mom, it worked! The letter worked!" More shuffling, and then a woman appeared behind the boy. Emma was exactly as the security guard had described, thin with dark hair in a ponytail, wearing a grey coat that had seen better days. Her face was pale with exhaustion, but her eyes were bright and wary. "What's going on?" she asked, placing a protective hand on Tommy's shoulder. "Your son wrote me a letter," Nathaniel explained, keeping his voice gentle. "I wanted to meet him." "And you?" Emma looked confused, then alarmed. "Tommy, what did you do?" "I wrote to Mr. Carter like Miss Jenkins taught us in school," Tommy said proudly. "She said if we have a problem, we should write a letter to someone who can help." Emma's face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. He shouldn't have bothered. You? We're fine, really." Nathaniel could see they were anything but fine. The apartment behind them was clean but nearly empty. A mattress on the floor, a small table with 2 mismatched chairs, a single lamp. "I brought some groceries," Nathaniel said, gesturing to his driver, who stood patiently with the bags. "Would it be okay if we came in?" Emma hesitated, pride battling with necessity. Tommy made the decision for her. "Mom, I'm hungry," he whispered, though loud enough for Nathaniel to hear. Emma's resolve crumbled. She stepped aside. "Please, come in." The refrigerator was empty, except for a half carton of milk and some carrots. The cabinets held a single box of macaroni and cheese and a can of beans. Nathaniel's driver unpacked the groceries while Tommy watched in amazement. "Is that all for us?" he asked, his eyes huge. "Every bit of it," Nathaniel confirmed. Emma stood by the sink, her arms wrapped around herself as if for protection. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked. Nathaniel took the letter from his pocket and handed it to her. As she read it, tears filled her eyes. "Tommy, honey, you shouldn't have—" "But you were hungry, Mom. You kept giving me your food." Emma knelt and hugged her son tightly. "That's what moms do." Nathaniel cleared his throat. "Can we talk for a moment, Emma?" They sat at the small table while Tommy helped the driver arrange food in the cabinets. "I grew up in an orphanage," Nathaniel said quietly. "My parents died when I was 10, fire in our apartment building. I know what it's like to feel alone." Emma's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It made me who I am. But your son's letter, it reminded me of something I've forgotten for a long time." He paused. "What happened to Tommy's father?" "Construction accident 8 months ago, no insurance. We lost our house, then our car. I work at a diner mornings and clean offices at night, but it's barely enough for rent." Nathaniel nodded. "I'd like to help. Not just with groceries, real help. Emma straightened. We don't need charity. It's not charity, it's... Nathaniel searched for the right words. It's an investment. In Tommy. In you. Why would you invest? In us? You don't even know us. Nathaniel looked at Tommy, who was excitedly showing the driver a small toy soldier, probably his only toy. Because sometimes we need reminders of what's important, he said simply. Money can solve a lot of problems, Emma. Let me solve some of yours. Before she could respond, his phone rang. Jessica, probably wondering where he was, he ignored it. I can find you a better apartment. Get Tommy into a good school. Help you find a job that pays what you deserve. Emma shook her head in disbelief. People don't just do things like this. I do, Nathaniel said firmly. At least I do now. Tommy bounded over to them. Mom, Mr. Carter's driver says there's ice cream in one of the bags. Can I have some, please? Emma laughed, a sound that transformed her tired face. Just a little, it's not dinner time yet. As Tommy raced back to the kitchen area, Emma turned to Nathaniel. He hasn't asked for anything in months. He knows we can't afford extras. Every kid should have ice cream, Nathaniel said, and toys, and a safe place to live. Emma studied him, as if trying to see beyond his expensive suit and confident manner. Why us, really? Nathaniel thought about the empty penthouse waiting for him, the meaningless meetings, the wealth that had never filled the hollowness inside him. Because, he said finally, I think we might be able to help each other. 3 days later, the headlines of the city newspaper read, Billionaire answers child's letter, changes 2 lives forever. But the real story was just beginning. In his office at Thompson Tower, Nathaniel looked out at the city with new eyes. His phone rang. Mr. Carter, Jessica said, your 2 o'clock is here. And Emma called. Tommy's school enrollment is all set. Thank you, Jessica. Nathaniel smiled. Tell my 2 o'clock I'll be right with them. And could you order something for Tommy? A bicycle, maybe. Whatever 8-year-old boys like these days. Of course, sir. As Nathaniel turned from the window, he touched the letter in his pocket. The letter he now carried everywhere. For the first time in decades, his heart wasn't empty anymore. And this was only the beginning. 1 month had passed since Tommy's letter had found its way into Nathaniel's hands. The changes in that short time were remarkable. Emma and Tommy had moved from their dingy apartment to a comfortable 2-bedroom condo in a safe neighborhood. Tommy was enrolled in Westside Elementary, one of the best schools in the district, and Emma had started a job at the Carter Foundation, overseeing community outreach programs. How's the new place? Nathaniel asked as he and Emma walked through Jefferson Park on a crisp Saturday morning. Tommy ran ahead of them, flying a kite Nathaniel had brought him. It still doesn't feel real, Emma admitted. Every morning I wake up expecting to be back in that old apartment. She pulled her new coat tighter around her. I keep telling Tommy not to get too comfortable, nothing lasts forever. Nathaniel frowned. You can get comfortable, Emma, this isn't temporary. She turned to face him, her eyes serious. People will talk, Nathaniel. They already are. The newspapers, the TV, everyone's speculating about why a billionaire suddenly took interest in a poor single mum. Let them talk, Nathaniel said firmly. What matters is that Tommy has a chance now, and so do you. Mum, Mr. Carter, look how high it's going, Tommy shouted, his face lit up with joy as the kite soared above the trees. Emma's expression softened. I haven't seen him this happy since before his father died. For that alone, I can never thank you enough. Nathaniel watched the boy, feeling a strange mix of emotions. In just a month, Tommy had become important to him in a way he couldn't have imagined. The boy's resilience, his optimism in the face of hardship, it reminded Nathaniel of himself at that age, before money and power had hardened him. You don't need to thank me, he said, quietly. Having you both in my life has been eye-opening. As they continued walking, Nathaniel's phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned. I need to take this. It's Richard Blackwood from the board. Emma nodded and went to join Tommy with the kite, while Nathaniel stepped away to answer. Nathaniel, we need to talk. Richard's voice was tense. The board is concerned about your recent activities. Be more specific, Richard. This charity case of yours, the woman and her son, it's becoming a distraction. The media is having a field day and investors are asking questions. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Emma and Tommy are not up for discussion, Richard. Everything you do is up for discussion when it affects the company. You've missed 3 board meetings to spend time with them. You've redirected foundation funds to programs she's running. People are wondering if you've lost your edge. My edge? Nathaniel laughed coldly. The company has never been more profitable. That's not the point, and you know it. Richard paused. There are rumors, Nathaniel, about your relationship with this woman, about your intentions. My intentions are my business, not when they could impact the future of Carter Enterprises. The board is calling for an emergency meeting on Monday. I suggest you come prepared to make some changes. The call ended, leaving Nathaniel seething. He looked over at Emma and Tommy, now both laughing as they ran with the kite. He had built his empire from nothing, dedicated his entire life to it. But now, for the first time, he found himself questioning whether it was worth the sacrifice. Monday morning brought dark clouds and the threat of rain. Nathaniel sat at the head of the boardroom table, facing 8 stern faces. Richard Blackwood sat directly opposite him, his expression smug. "Let's cut to the chase," Nathaniel said. "I understand there are concerns about my personal life." "This isn't about your personal life," Victoria Simmons, the CFO, interjected. "It's about perception. Our shareholders expect a certain level of discretion." Discretion? Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Is helping a child and his mother somehow indiscreet? Richard leaned forward. When you parade them around town, when you give her a high-ranking position at the foundation with no qualifications, when the tabloids run headlines questioning whether she's after your money, yes, it becomes our concern. Nathaniel felt his temper rising. Emma has never asked me for a penny, and she's more qualified to run community programs than any of the Ivy League consultants we usually hire. She's lived it. That's exactly the problem, said Howard Jensen, the oldest board member. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. This isn't the Nathaniel Carter we know. Maybe it's time you got to know me better, Nathaniel replied coldly. Victoria slid a folder across the table. We've prepared a proposal. The woman and her son will be provided for generously, but at a distance. A trust fund for the boys' education. A suitable job for the mother in one of our subsidiary companies in another state. Problem solved. Nathaniel didn't touch the folder. And if I refuse, Richard smiled without warmth, then we'll be forced to call a vote of no confidence. The bylaws are clear, Nathaniel. Even you can be replaced. The threat hung in the air. Nathaniel had never imagined it would come to this. He had built Carter Enterprises from a single investment 30 years ago. It was his life's work. But now, as he looked at the cold, calculating faces around him, he realized that somewhere along the way he had created a monster. A company so focused on profit that basic human kindness was seen as weakness. I'll need time to consider, he said finally. You have until Friday, Richard replied. Then we vote. Tarsi switch in the rain was falling steadily as Nathaniel's car pulled up in front of the Carter Foundation building. He spotted Emma leaving, huddled under an umbrella, her expression troubled. Emma, he called, getting out of the car. She turned, surprise flickering across her face. Nathaniel, I thought you'd be in meetings all day. Can we talk? He glanced at his watch. What about lunch? 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of Marino's, an Italian restaurant Nathaniel owned but rarely visited. Emma was unusually quiet. Is everything okay? He asked. She met his eyes. I think I should be asking you that. I got a strange call today from HR. They wanted to discuss transition options. Nathaniel set down his fork. What exactly did they say? Something about opportunities at affiliated companies in Chicago, Atlanta, or Miami. She paused. They mentioned a very generous relocation package. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. The board hadn't wasted any time. Emma, I'm sorry, I didn't authorize that. What's going on, Nathaniel? First the media stories, now this. I know something's happening. Her voice softened. You can tell me. He found himself wanting to confide in her, something he hadn't done with anyone in years. The board is concerned about our relationship. They see you and Tommy as a distraction. From what? From making money. From the Carter Enterprises mission. He made air quotes with his fingers. They're giving me an ultimatum. Either I distance myself from you and Tommy, or they'll try to force me out. Emma's face paled. So the relocation offer is their way of solving the problem, he finished bitterly. What are you going to do? Nathaniel looked at her, really looked at her. In the past month, Emma had become more than just a charity, case or a way to ease his conscience. She had become someone he respected, someone he looked forward to seeing each day. And Tommy, the boy had awakened something in him he thought had died long ago. I don't know, he admitted. I've spent my whole life building this company. It's all I have. A flash of hurt crossed Emma's face. I see. No, you don't. He reached across the table and took her hand. That's what I always thought. But now I'm not so sure. Later that evening, Nathaniel sat alone in his penthouse, a glass of scotch in his hand. The city lights twinkled below, a reminder of all he had achieved. His phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Richard called again. Wants your decision by tomorrow, not Friday. The pressure was mounting. Nathaniel took a sip of his drink, remembering the board meeting, their faces, their threats. Then his mind shifted to Emma's expression when he'd said the company was all. He had. The hurt in her eyes had affected him more than he wanted to admit. His phone rang, not a number he recognized. Hello? Mr. Carter, it's Tommy. The boy's voice was small, uncertain. Nathaniel straightened. Tommy? How did you get my number? Mom has it on her phone for emergencies. There was a pause. I think this is an emergency. What's wrong? Is your Mom okay? She's crying in her room. She thinks I can't hear, but I can. Tommy's voice trembled. She was talking to someone on the phone about moving away. Are we leaving? Did we do something wrong? Nathaniel's heart clenched. Nobody, you didn't do anything wrong, neither did your mum. Then why is she crying? Why do we have to leave? How could he explain corporate politics to an 8-year-old? Sometimes grown-ups have complicated problems, Tommy. Is it because of us, because you helped us? My teacher says no good deed goes unpunished. Is that what's happening? Out of the mouth of babes. Nathaniel stood up and walked to the window. Your teacher might be right, but that doesn't mean we should stop doing good deeds. Mom says we were fine before. That we didn't need anybody's help. Tommy sniffled. But I don't want to go back to being hungry. And I like my new school. And his voice dropped to a whisper. I like having you around. It's like having a dad again. Nathaniel closed his eyes, feeling something break inside him. Tommy, can you put your mom on the phone? She told me not to bother you with our problems. It's okay. I want to talk to her. There was shuffling, then muffled conversation. Finally, Emma's voice came on the line. Nathaniel, I'm sorry. I didn't know he called you. Don't be sorry. Nathaniel took a deep breath. I've made a decision, Emma. I'm not going to let the board dictate who I can or can't have in my life. But your company is just a company. There will always be more money to make, more deals to close. But people like you and Tommy, you're rare. What are you saying? Nathaniel looked out at the city, his city, and for the first time in years felt completely certain about something. I'm saying I choose you, both of you, whatever that means for my position at Carter Enterprises. Emma was silent for a long moment. That's a big decision, Nathaniel. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. What will you do if they force you out? Nathaniel laughed, surprising himself. Start over, I guess. I did it once before. Nathaniel, come to my office tomorrow, both of you. Let me handle the board my way. After they hung up, Nathaniel called Jessica. Set up a board meeting for 10 a.m. tomorrow, full attendance required. And Jessica, prepare the Phoenix file. The Phoenix file. Her voice registered shock. Are you sure, sir? Absolutely. It's time for a rebirth. The boardroom was tense the next morning. All 9 board members were present, along with the company's legal counsel. Nathaniel stood at the head of the table, more relaxed than anyone had seen him in years. Before we begin, he said, I'd like to introduce 2 special guests. The door opened, and Emma walked in with Tommy. The boy looked nervous, but straightened. So when he saw Nathaniel, Emma squeezed his hand encouragingly. Richard Blackwood stood up. This is highly inappropriate. Board meetings are confidential. Sit down, Richard, Nathaniel said calmly. Emma and Tommy are here because they're the reason for this meeting. I wanted them to witness what happens next. He nodded to Jessica, who distributed folders to each board member. What is this? Victoria asked, opening hers. That, Nathaniel explained, is the Phoenix file, named after the mythical bird that rises from the ashes. He smiled. It's my insurance policy. The room fell silent as the board members read the contents. Richard's face turned ashen. This is blackmail, he sputtered finally. No, Richard. It's accountability. Nathaniel walked around the table slowly. I've been building that file for 15 years. Every questionable decision this board has made, every corner cut, every ethical line crossed in the name of profit. He stopped behind Richard's chair. Including your private deal with Omnitech last year, the one that should have been disclosed as a conflict of interest. Richard's mouth opened and closed without sound. Nathaniel continued. I never planned to use this information. I believed in this company, in all of you. He looked around the table. But you forced my hand when you threatened what matters to me. What do you want? Howard Jensen asked quietly. Simple. A restructuring of the board. New bylaws that give the foundation more autonomy and a bigger share of our profits, and a public commitment to corporate social responsibility, starting with programs for single parents and at-risk children. Victoria frowned. And if we refuse? Then this folder goes to the SEC, the Justice Department, and every major news outlet in the country. Nathaniel smiled. I may lose my company, but many of you will lose much more. The room erupted in angry voices. Tommy looked alarmed, but Emma placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Enough! Nathaniel's voice cut through the chaos. This isn't a negotiation, it's a new direction. He walked over to Emma and Tommy. These people remind me of what's truly valuable. Not stock prices or market share, but human connection, compassion, family. He knelt down to Tommy's level. Your letter didn't just change your life, buddy, it changed mine too. Tommy smiled shyly. So we don't have to move away? No, you're staying right here. Nathaniel stood and faced the board again. All of you have until the end of the day to decide. Stay and be part of a better Carter Enterprises, or resign and face the consequences. He took Emma's hand. Now, I believe Tommy has a school presentation. Today, we wouldn't want to miss that. As they walked toward the door, Richard called out, You're making a mistake, Nathaniel. This company is your legacy. Nathaniel paused and looked back. No, Richard. This company was just my job. These two, they could be my legacy. Emma's eyes widened at his words. As they left the boardroom, she whispered, Did you mean that? Nathaniel looked at her, then at Tommy, who was happily studying the fish tank in the waiting area. Every word, he replied, if you'll have me. For the first time since they'd met, Emma initiated contact, reaching up to touch his face gently. We'll see, she said with a small smile. We'll see. As they walked out of the building together, photographers snapped their pictures. Tomorrow's headlines would be sensational, no doubt. But for once, Nathaniel didn't care what anyone thought. The only opinions that mattered now belonged to the woman and child walking beside him, the family he never knew he wanted, until a letter changed everything. The headlines splashed across every newspaper in the city the next morning. Billionaire chooses love over money. Carter Enterprises in turmoil. The photo beneath showed Nathaniel, Emma, and Tommy leaving the office building together, looking like a family despite the chaos around them. At Tommy's school, the whispers started as soon as they arrived for his presentation. That's them, one mother said to another, not bothering to lower her voice. She's got him wrapped around her finger. Talk about landing on your feet. Emma kept her eyes forward, her back straight, but Nathaniel could see the hurt in her expression. He placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. Ignore them, he said quietly. They don't know you. Tommy bounced ahead of them, oblivious to the gossip. Mr. Carter, Mom, my classroom is this way. My project is all set up. The classroom fell silent when they walked in. Miss Jenkins, Tommy's teacher, recovered quickly and welcomed them with a warm smile. Tommy has been so excited about his presentation, she told them. He's been working very hard. The project was displayed on a small table, a diorama of a city park with tiny figures. A sign on the front read, "Everyday Heroes." When it was, Tommy's turn to present, he stood confidently in front of the class. "My project is about heroes," he began. "Not superheroes with capes, but real heroes who help people every day." He pointed to the figures in his diorama. "This is my mum. She's a hero because she worked 2 jobs to take care of me when my dad died. She gave me her food when we didn't have enough." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Nathaniel squeezed her hand. "And this," Tommy continued, pointing to another figure, "is Mr. Carter. He got my letter and came to help us even though he didn't know us. He showed me that sometimes heroes wear business suits instead of capes." Several parents chuckled, breaking the tension in the room. Tommy beamed at Nathaniel, who found himself unexpectedly moved by the boy's words. "My project shows that anyone can be a hero," Tommy concluded. "You just have to care about people and be brave enough to help them." The class applauded. Miss Jenkins gave Tommy a gold star sticker. "Excellent work, Tommy. I think we've all learned something important today." As they left the classroom, a woman approached Emma. "I'm Diane Miller, Tyler's mum," she introduced herself. "I just wanted to say I was laid off last year, spent 6 months barely making ends meet. What you went through, I get it." She glanced at Nathaniel. "And I think what you two are doing is wonderful, no matter what people say." Emma smiled gratefully. "Thank you, that means a lot." Outside the school, Nathaniel's phone buzzed with messages from Jessica about the board's response, but he ignored them. Today was about Tommy, not business. "How about ice cream to celebrate?" he suggested. "Yes!" Tommy pumped his fist in the air. Emma laughed. "I suppose we can break the no sweets before lunch rule just this once." At the ice cream parlor, they sat at a small table by the window, Tommy happily devouring a chocolate sundae. Nathaniel watched Emma as she wiped a smudge of ice cream from Tommy's chin, her touch gentle, her eyes full of love for her son. "You're an amazing mother," Nathaniel said quietly. Emma looked up, surprised by the compliment. "I just do my best." "Your best is pretty incredible." He paused. "Tommy was right, you know. You are a hero." She shook her head. "I'm just stubborn. Too proud to give up. That's part of what I admire about you." Nathaniel's voice grew serious. "You could have taken the easy way out many times, accepted handouts without trying to stand on your own, but you've always fought to maintain your dignity, your independence." "Not very successfully," Emma said wryly. "We were practically starving when you found us, but you were still fighting." Nathaniel leaned forward. "That's why I trust you, Emma. Why I know you're not after my money, despite what the gossips say. You've never once asked me for anything for yourself." She looked down at her barely touched ice cream. "Maybe that's my pride talking again." "Maybe it's integrity," Nathaniel countered. "Something. Rare these days." He checked his watch reluctantly. "I should call Jessica, see what's happening with the board." Emma nodded. "Go ahead. Tommy and I can walk home from here. It's not far." "I'll just be a minute," Nathaniel promised, stepping outside to make the call. Jessica answered immediately. "Finally. I've been trying to reach you all morning." "What's the verdict?" Nathaniel asked, watching Emma and Tommy through the window. 7. Of the 9 board members have agreed to your terms. Richard and Victoria resigned. Nathaniel hadn't expected that. Both of them. Richard's lawyers advised him it was the safest option, considering what was in the Phoenix file. Victoria is joining Westlake Industries next month. And the others? They've signed the new bylaws. The foundation's budget has been tripled, with Emma confirmed as Director of Community Outreach. "It's all done, sir." Relief washed over him. "Thank you, Jessica. You've been invaluable through all of this." "There's one more thing," she added. "A reporter from the Tribune called. They want an exclusive interview with you and Emma. About your relationship." Nathaniel frowned. "Tell them no comment." "Sir, if I may, the rumors are getting wild. People are saying she's blackmailing you, or that this is some kind of publicity stunt. Let them talk. With respect, that approach isn't working." "The stock has dropped 12 points since yesterday." Nathaniel sighed. "What do you suggest?" "Control the narrative. One interview on your terms. Show the world who Emma really is, and who you are now." He considered it. "I'll discuss it with..." Emma, no promises. When Nathaniel returned to the table, Tommy was telling Emma about a field trip his class was planning to the Science Museum. "Can Mr. Carter come too?" Tommy asked as Nathaniel sat down. Emma smiled apologetically. "Honey, Mr. Carter is very busy running his company." "Actually," Nathaniel interrupted, "I'd love to come. When is it?" Tommy's face lit up. "Next Tuesday. We're going to see the dinosaurs and the space exhibit." "Tuesday it is," Nathaniel confirmed. He turned to Emma. The board caved. Everything settled according to our terms. Relief flooded her face. "So, your position is secure?" "More than secure. And yours too. The foundation's budget has been tripled, with you officially confirmed as director." Emma shook her head in disbelief. "This is all happening so fast." "There's one more thing." Nathaniel hesitated. "The press wants an interview with both of us," her expression closed. "To talk about what? How I supposedly seduced a billionaire?" "To set the record straight. People are making up their own stories. Maybe it's time we told the real one." Tommy looked between them. "Are people saying bad things about us?" Emma smoothed his hair. "Some people don't understand our situation, honey." "What's to understand?" Tommy asked with a child's straightforward logic. "Mr. Carter is helping us because he's nice, and because he was alone like we were." Nathaniel smiled at the boy's simple summary. "Out of the mouths of babes," Emma sighed. "Let me think about the interview. This isn't just about me. It affects Tommy too, of course," Nathaniel agreed. "Take all the time you need." Later that evening, Nathaniel returned to his penthouse. The place felt emptier than usual after spending the day with Emma and Tommy. He loosened his tie and poured himself a drink, wondering when exactly his priorities had shifted so dramatically. For 30 years, Carter Enterprises had been his entire world. Now he found himself checking his watch during meetings, eager to finish so he could take Tommy to the park or have dinner with Emma. His phone rang, Emma's number. "Is everything all right?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Everything's fine," she assured him. I've been thinking about the interview. Maybe you're right. Maybe we should do it." "What changed your mind?" She was quiet for a moment. "Tommy came home from playing with some neighborhood kids. He asked me why one of the boys said his mom called me a gold digger. He didn't even know what it meant." Nathaniel winced. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault, but I realized we can't hide from this. The rumors will follow Tommy unless we address them." "Are you sure you're ready for that kind of scrutiny?" "No," Emma admitted with a small laugh. "But I'm tired of people assuming the worst about me, about us." The way she said us made Nathaniel's heart skip a beat. "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What is this? Between us, I mean." He wasn't usually one to fumble for words, but with Emma, he found himself uncharacteristically uncertain. "I know how I feel, but I don't want to presume anything." Emma was quiet for so long that Nathaniel thought the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know exactly. It's complicated. It doesn't have to be. Doesn't it?" Her voice grew serious. "Nathaniel, you turned your life upside down for us, risked your company. How do I know if what I feel is real or just gratitude? How do you know?" It was a fair question. "Time, I guess. We give ourselves time to figure it out. What if people are right? What if I'm just taking advantage of your generosity? Are you?" "No." The vehemence in her voice made him smile. "Then we ignore what people say and focus on what we know is true." Nathaniel took a deep breath. "And what I know is that I care about you, Emma. You and Tommy both. More than I've cared about anyone in a very long time." "I care about you too," she said softly. "That's what scares me. I can't afford to make a mistake. Not with Tommy's heart on the line." "Then we take it slow," Nathaniel promised. "One day at a time." The interview was scheduled for the following week at Emma's apartment. Nathaniel arrived early, bringing breakfast for the three of them. Tommy was excited about being in the newspaper and had put on his fancy clothes, khaki pants and a button-up shirt with superhero socks peeking out beneath. "Do I look good?" he asked Nathaniel seriously. "Very professional," Nathaniel assured, him straightening the boy's collar. "But you might want to comb your hair." While Tommy ran off to find a comb, Nathaniel helped Emma set the table. She looked nervous, fiddling with the plates and cups. "It's going to be fine," he told her. "Just be yourself, that's all anyone needs to see." The reporter, Caroline Walsh, arrived promptly at 10. She was younger than Nathaniel expected, with a friendly smile that put Emma visibly at ease. "Thank you for agreeing to this," Caroline said, as they settled in the living room. "There's been so much speculation about your story. I'm glad to get it firsthand." She began with simple questions. How they met, what prompted Nathaniel's involvement, the changes in their lives over the past 2 months. Emma gradually relaxed, sharing Tommy's letter and their initial meeting with a warmth that made the story come alive. Then Caroline turned to the more difficult questions. "Ms. Turner, many people have suggested that your relationship with Mr. Carter is strategic. How do you respond to that?" Emma's chin lifted slightly. "I understand why people might think that. A billionaire suddenly takes interest in a struggling single mom. It sounds like a calculated move." She looked at Nathaniel. "But they don't know him. The man who showed up at our door that day wasn't looking for publicity or praise. He genuinely wanted to help." "And your feelings for him now?" Emma hesitated. "They're evolving. Nathaniel has shown me kindness when I needed it most. He's given Tommy something he desperately missed, a male role model who cares about him. But we're taking things one day at a time." Caroline turned to Nathaniel. "And you, Mr. Carter, your board nearly forced you out over this relationship. Some might call that drastic for someone you've known only a few months." Nathaniel considered his words carefully. "I spent 30 years building a company, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what truly matters. Tommy's letter was a wake-up call. It reminded me of my own childhood, of being alone and wishing someone would care enough to help." He looked at Emma. "What I feel for Emma and Tommy isn't charity or pity. It's connection. Something I've been missing for longer than I realized." Caroline's expression softened. "Tommy, what do you think about all of this?" Tommy, who had been surprisingly patient during the adult conversation, perked up. "I think Mr. Carter is the best. He doesn't just buy me stuff. He listens to me and plays with me, and he makes my mum smile again. And if your mum and Mr. Carter became more than friends someday, how would you feel about that?" Tommy considered this seriously. "I'd be happy, but only if they're both happy too." Caroline smiled. Wise words from a young man. As the interview concluded, Caroline asked for a photo of the three of them. They posed somewhat awkwardly on the sofa. "Relax," Caroline encouraged. "Pretend I'm not here." Tommy giggled and leaned against Nathaniel's side. Emma, sitting on Nathaniel's other side, gradually eased her stiff posture. Nathaniel put his arm around her shoulders and she didn't pull away. "Perfect," Caroline said, snapping several shots. "That's the story right there." After she left, Emma let out a long breath. "That wasn't as terrible as I expected." "You were amazing," Nathaniel told her. "Honest and dignified." Tommy tugged at Nathaniel's sleeve. "Can we still go to the park? You promised to teach me how to throw a curveball." "Absolutely," Nathaniel agreed, grateful for the boy's ability to bring everything back to what mattered. As they walked to the park, Tommy ran ahead, bursting with energy. Emma slipped her hand into Nathaniel's, a simple gesture that felt monumental. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing us, really seeing us, when we were invisible to everyone else." Nathaniel squeezed her hand gently. "You were never invisible, Emma. You just needed someone to pay attention." Done to, the article appeared in the Sunday edition of the Tribune with the headline, "The Letter That Changed Everything. Billionaire Nathaniel Carter opens up about family, second chances, and what really matters." The photo showed the three of them on the sofa, looking comfortable and natural together. Nathaniel in the middle, Tommy leaning against him, Emma with her head slightly tilted toward Nathaniel's shoulder. They looked like a family. The public reaction was immediate and largely positive. The stock price rebounded. The foundation received an influx of donations. Emma's inbox filled with messages from single parents sharing their stories and thanking her for being their voice. But not everyone was pleased. Richard Blackwood, the former board member, seethed as he read the article in his home office. The phone rang, a private number he recognized immediately. "I saw the article," said the caller, without preamble. "This complicates things. It changes nothing, Richard insisted. Carter is still vulnerable, more so now that he's tied himself to these people publicly. Perhaps. The caller's voice was cold. But we need to accelerate our timeline. How quickly? Can you access the European accounts? A week, maybe less. Do it. And find something on the woman. Everyone has secrets. Dig deep enough and you'll find hers. Richard smiled grimly. Consider it done. He hung up and turned back to his computer, pulling up a search on Emma Turner. Nathaniel might have won this round, but the game was far from over. A month after the interview, life had settled into a new normal. Emma thrived in her role at the foundation, implementing programs for single parents that were already showing remarkable results. Tommy's grades improved, and he made new friends at school. And Nathaniel found himself spending more evenings in Emma's cozy apartment than in his sterile penthouse. One Saturday morning, Emma was making breakfast, while Nathaniel helped Tommy with a science project at the kitchen table. If we connect... The battery here, Nathaniel explained. The light bulb should... The doorbell interrupted them. Emma wiped her hands on a towel. Are we expecting someone? Nathaniel shook his head. Not that I know of. Emma opened the door to find a tall, thin man in an expensive suit, holding a thick envelope. Emma Turner? Yes. I'm Gerald Monroe, representing the family of Thomas Turner Sr. Emma's face paled. My late husband's family? Indeed. Gerald handed her the envelope. This is a formal notice of our intent to file for custody of Thomas Turner Jr. The family feels the boy's current living situation is unsuitable. Nathaniel was beside Emma in an instant. What the hell is this? Gerald looked at him coldly. And you must be Mr. Carter. The family has concerns about their grandson's welfare given Ms. Turner's arrangement with you. The moral implications are troubling. Moral implications, Emma's voice shook. They haven't even seen Tommy since the funeral. Nevertheless, they are his blood relatives, and they have the resources to provide a stable, traditional home environment. Gerald nodded curtly. The papers have been filed. You'll be hearing from the court soon. As he turned to leave, he added, Oh, and Ms. Turner, you might want to explain those old arrest records from your youth. The judge will certainly be interested. The door closed, leaving Emma clutching the envelope, her face ashen. Nathaniel, she whispered, they're trying to take my son. Arrest records? Nathaniel asked gently. Emma, what is he talking about? She closed her eyes briefly. I was 17. Stupid and angry after my parents died. I got caught shoplifting twice. The charges were eventually dismissed, but the record exists, Nathaniel finished. Emma, look at me. They will not take Tommy from you. I promise you that. How can you be sure? Because I will use every resource, every connection, every dollar I have to fight this. From the kitchen, Tommy called out, Mom, the pancakes are burning. Emma quickly composed herself, forcing a smile. Coming, honey. As she hurried to salvage breakfast, Nathaniel picked up the envelope, his mind racing. This wasn't a coincidence. Not after the article, not after the changes at Carter Enterprises. Someone was targeting Emma, targeting them through the most vulnerable point, Tommy. And Nathaniel had a sinking feeling he knew exactly who was behind it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings and sleepless nights. Emma tried to keep things normal for Tommy, but the strain showed in her tired eyes and forced smiles. Nathaniel hired the best family law attorney in the state, Patricia Winters, who arrived at Emma's apartment with 3 assistants and stacks of documents. So I've reviewed the initial filing, Patricia said, spreading papers across Emma's dining table. Thomas Sr.'s parents, Harold and Margaret Turner, are claiming you're an unfit mother based on your juvenile record and your relationship with Mr. Carter. Emma's hands trembled as she poured coffee. They barely knew Tommy. They came to the funeral, sent a birthday card last year, and that's it. Why now? Why after all this time? Patricia exchanged a glance with Nathaniel. Someone's backing them. The legal team they've hired costs thousands per hour. On a retired accountant's pension, there's no way Harold Turner could afford them. Richard, Nathaniel said grimly. This has his fingerprints all over it. Can you prove that? Patricia asked. Not yet, but I will. Tommy entered the room, backpack in hand, ready for school. Mom, is everything okay? Emma quickly composed herself. Everything's fine, honey. These are just some work friends of Mr. Carter's. Tommy looked skeptical but didn't press. Okay, I'm ready for school. I'll drop him off today, Nathaniel offered. Give you time to talk with Patricia. In the car, Tommy was unusually quiet, looking out the window at the passing city. Finally, he asked, "Are those people trying to take me away from Mom?" Nathaniel nearly swerved. What? Why would you ask that? Tommy shrugged. I heard Mom crying on the phone to Aunt Jen. She said someone wanted to take me away. His voice was small. Is it because we're not rich enough? Nathaniel pulled the car over and turned to face Tommy. Listen to me. No one is going to take you away from your mom. Ever. You know those superhero movies you like, where the good guys always win in the end? Tommy nodded. Well, your mom is the strongest, bravest person I know. And I'm pretty tough too. We're the good guys in this story, and we're going to win, I promise. Tommy studied Nathaniel's face carefully. Pinky promise? Nathaniel solemnly linked his pinky finger with Tommy's small one. Pinky promise. When they arrived at the school, Tommy hesitated before getting out of the car. Mr. Carter, I made you something. He pulled a folded paper from his backpack and handed it to Nathaniel. It was a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one in a suit, a medium one with long hair, and a small one in the middle. Above them, in careful letters, my family. Nathaniel stared at the drawing, emotion tightening his throat. Thank you, Tommy. I'll keep this always. After dropping Tommy off, Nathaniel made a detour before returning to Emma's apartment. He drove to his old neighborhood, to the rundown building that had once housed the West Side Children's Home, the orphanage where he'd spent his childhood after his parents died. The building was now a community center, but many of the staff remained from Nathaniel's time. Mrs. Henderson, once a young caretaker and now the elderly director, greeted him with a warm hug. Twice in 1 year. To what do we owe the pleasure, Nathaniel? He'd been donating to the home for decades, but had only recently started visiting again. I need your help, Mrs. Henderson, and access to the old records room. An hour later, Nathaniel had what he needed, a dusty folder containing information about his own troubled youth, including incidents remarkably similar to Emma's. Mrs. Henderson watched as he flipped through the pages. You were angry back then, she observed. Hurting. I was, Nathaniel agreed, but someone gave me a second chance, just like I'm trying to do for Emma and Tommy. Mrs. Henderson squeezed his arm. You're not that lost boy anymore, Nathaniel. You've become a good man. I'm trying to be, he said simply. When Nathaniel returned to Emma's apartment, Patricia was going through Emma's past with a fine-tooth comb, looking for anything the Turners' legal team might use against her. So, after your shoplifting incidents, you went to live with your aunt in Chicago? Emma nodded. For about 6 months, then I came back, finished high school, got a scholarship to community college. Any other brushes with the law, anything at all? No, nothing. Patricia made notes. We'll need character witnesses, people who can testify about your parenting, your relationship with Tommy. My boss from the diner, Emma suggested. Tommy's teachers, our old neighbors. Good. Patricia looked at Nathaniel. And what about you, Mr. Carter? How involved do you want to be in this case? Completely involved, Nathaniel stated firmly. I'm not going anywhere. Emma glanced at him, her eyes full of emotion. Nathaniel, this could get ugly. They'll drag your name through the mud too. Let them try. He took her hand. We're in this together. Patricia cleared her throat. That brings me to a delicate point. The nature of your relationship will be scrutinized. If you're romantically involved, it would actually be better to be open about it. Hiding it looks like you have something to be ashamed of. Emma and Nathaniel exchanged a look. They hadn't defined their relationship even to themselves. They'd been taking things slowly, mindful of Tommy's feelings and the public attention. We care about each other, Emma said carefully, but we're still figuring things out. Well, figure it out quickly, Patricia advised, because the hearing is in 3 weeks, and you can bet they'll be asking about it under oath. That sigh. Evening after Tommy was asleep, Emma and Nathaniel sat on her small balcony watching the city lights. A bottle of wine sat between them, barely touched. "I'm scared, Nathaniel," Emma admitted. "What if they take him from me?" "They won't," he assured her, though his own worry gnawed at him. "We have the truth on our side." Sometimes the truth isn't enough. Emma pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. "Tommy's all I have." "You have me too," Nathaniel said softly. "If you want me." Emma looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "What are we doing, Nathaniel, really? In the beginning it was simple. You were helping us because of Tommy's letter. But now it's more," he finished. "At least for me." "For me too," she whispered. "But it's complicated. My life is a mess. I have a custody battle hanging over my head. I'm not the society wife a man like you should have." Nathaniel laughed softly. "Emma, when have I ever cared about should? I threw away the rulebook the day I showed up at your door with groceries." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Before Tommy's letter, I had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. I was alone, Emma, surrounded by people who wanted what I could give them, not who I was. And now? Now I have you and Tommy. I have someone who challenges me, who sees past the money to the orphan I used to be. I have a boy who draws me into his family pictures." He squeezed her hand. "I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." Emma's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I don't want to lose you either." Nathaniel leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met in a gentle kiss that deepened as Emma's arms circled his neck. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "Well," Nathaniel said with a smile, "that answers one question for Patricia." Emma laughed, resting her forehead against his. "I guess it does." "Emma Turner," Nathaniel said softly, "I think I'm falling in love with you." She touched his face gently. "I think I'm falling in love with you too, and it terrifies me." "We'll be terrified together," he promised, "and we'll fight together too, for Tommy, for us." The day before the custody hearing, Nathaniel received a call from Jessica. "Sir, I have something you need to see. It's about Richard Blackwood." An hour later, Nathaniel and Emma sat in his office while Jessica presented her findings. "I've been monitoring Richard's communications," she explained. "Not directly, that would be illegal, but tracking his movements, his meetings." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Is that legal?" Jessica smiled slightly. "Gray area, but what I found isn't gray at all." She handed Nathaniel a folder. "He's been meeting regularly with Harold Turner, and more importantly with this man." She pulled up a photo on her tablet, a familiar face that made Nathaniel's jaw clench. "Michael Davis," he said, "my biggest competitor." "Yes, and he's funneling money to the Turners for their legal fees." Jessica pulled out bank statements. "Through a series of shell companies, but the trail is clear if you know where to look." Emma leaned forward. "But why? What does this Michael Davis get out of taking my son away from me?" "It's not about Tommy," Nathaniel explained grimly. "It's about destroying me. Davis has wanted Carter Enterprises for years. Richard wants revenge for being forced out. They're using you and Tommy to get to me." "That's monstrous," Emma whispered. "It is," Nathaniel agreed, "but it's also their mistake. Because now we have proof of conspiracy." Jessica nodded. "I've prepared everything for Patricia. There's more. Richard and Davis were planning a hostile takeover of Carter Enterprises. They've been buying up shares through dummy corporations, waiting for the perfect moment of vulnerability, such as when Nathaniel's reputation is damaged by an ugly custody battle," Emma concluded. "Exactly." Jessica looked at Nathaniel. "What do you want to do with this information?" Nathaniel stood up, his decision already made. "Take it all to Patricia and call the FBI. What they're doing isn't just unethical, some of it is illegal." As Jessica left to make the calls, Emma looked troubled. "Will this be enough to stop the custody case?" "I don't know," Nathaniel admitted, "but it gives us ammunition, and sometimes that's all you need to win a war." Thursday, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters the next morning. Nathaniel held Emma's hand tightly as they made their way inside, both dressed impeccably. Tommy was staying with Emma's friend Jen, sheltered from the proceedings. In the courtroom, Harold and Margaret Turner sat stiffly on one side, their expensive legal team arrayed around them. Harold's eyes were cold when they met Emma's. Margaret looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her purse. Patricia met them at their table, looking confident. "We've filed the new evidence. The judge is reviewing it now." Emma nodded, too nervous to speak. Nathaniel squeezed her hand under the table. The proceedings began with opening statements. The Turners' lawyer painted Emma as an unstable parent, with a criminal past, living in a morally questionable arrangement with a wealthy benefactor. He implied that Tommy was being used as a prop for publicity, that his welfare was secondary to their relationship. Emma's grip on Nathaniel's hand tightened with each accusation. When it was Patricia's turn, she approached the bench with quiet authority. "Your Honor, before I begin, I would like to address the evidence we submitted this morning. It proves conclusively that this case is not about Thomas Turner Jr.'s welfare, but about a corporate vendetta against Nathaniel Carter, using an innocent child as leverage." The judge frowned. "That's a serious accusation, Ms. Winters, which we can prove beyond doubt." Patricia presented the evidence Jessica had compiled: the meetings, the money trail, the connection to Michael Davis. The Turners' lawyer jumped up. "Objection, this is irrelevant to the custody matter." "On the contrary," Patricia countered, "it goes directly to motive and good faith. The Turners have never shown interest in their grandson until now. They've been manipulated and financed by parties who wish to harm Mr. Carter through Ms. Turner and her son." The judge studied the documents carefully. "I'll allow this evidence, and I'm deeply troubled by what I'm seeing." Harold Turner shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Margaret looked close to tears. Patricia continued, "Now, as to Ms. Turner's fitness. As a parent, we have 27 character witnesses prepared to testify about her exceptional care of Tommy, despite difficult circumstances. We have documentation of Tommy's excellent school performance, his health records, his stable home environment." She walked to Emma and placed a hand on her shoulder. "But the most compelling evidence is the love between a mother and her son. Emma Turner has sacrificed everything for Tommy's welfare, including her own meals when food was scarce. What better definition of motherhood could there be?" By lunchtime, the tide had clearly turned. The judge called both legal teams to his chambers, leaving Emma and Nathaniel waiting anxiously in the courtroom. "No matter what happens," Nathaniel told her, "we'll keep fighting." Emma nodded, exhausted but resolute. "I know." When the judge returned, he looked directly at the Turners. "Mr. and Mrs. Turner, having reviewed the evidence, I'm deeply concerned about your motivations in this case. I'm referring the financial matters to the district attorney's office for further investigation." Harold Turner paled. Margaret began to cry softly. "As for custody," the judge continued, "I find no evidence whatsoever that Emma Turner is anything but a devoted, capable mother. The petition for custody is denied." Emma let out a sob of relief. Nathaniel wrapped his arms around her, his own eyes damp. "Furthermore," the judge added, "I'm imposing a restraining order preventing the Turners from approaching Tommy without Ms. Turner's explicit permission. This case is dismissed." As they left the courtroom, reporters clamored for statements. Nathaniel shielded Emma from the worst of it, but she stopped on the courthouse steps, suddenly determined. "I'd like to say something," she told the press gathered there. "Not about the case, but about what's really important." The cameras focused on her as she spoke. "Today isn't about winning or losing. It's about a little boy who deserves to grow up surrounded by love and security. That's all any child needs, really. Not wealth or status or perfect circumstances, just love." She looked at Nathaniel. "And sometimes love comes from unexpected places. Sometimes it starts with a simple letter that changes everything." 3. Months later, Nathaniel stood in the empty ballroom of the newly renovated Carter Community Center, surveying the space with satisfaction. What had once been an abandoned warehouse was now a gleaming facility with after-school programs, job training, and resources for single parents. Emma's vision had become reality, funded by Nathaniel, but shaped by her understanding of what families truly needed. "Do you think we have enough chairs?" Emma asked, joining him. The grand opening is tomorrow and all 300 spots filled up immediately. We'll find more if we need them, Nathaniel assured her, pulling her into his arms. Have I told you today how proud I am of you? She smiled up at him. Only twice. Well, consider this number 3. He kissed her softly. You've done something remarkable here, Emma. We did it together, she corrected, just like everything else these past 6 months. So much had changed since the custody hearing. Richard Blackwood and Michael Davis were under federal investigation for securities fraud. The Turners had sent a heartfelt apology letter, admitting they'd been manipulated and asking for a chance to know their grandson properly. Emma, after careful consideration, had allowed a supervised visit, which had gone surprisingly well. But the biggest change was in their personal lives. Nathaniel had all but moved into Emma's condo, though he kept his penthouse for occasional, late work nights. Tommy had blossomed with the stability and love surrounding him, and Emma had found her, calling at the foundation, helping families who were struggling just as she once had. Earth to Nathaniel, Emma said, waving a hand in front of his face. Where did you go just now? I was thinking about how far we've come, he admitted. And how far we still have to go. She tilted her head. What does that mean? Nathaniel took a deep breath. It means I have something to ask you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I was going to wait until after the opening tomorrow, make some grand gesture, but suddenly I don't want to wait another day. Emma's eyes widened as he dropped to one knee. Nathaniel, Emma Turner, you and Tommy have given me something. I never thought I'd have a family, a home that's more than just a place to sleep, a purpose beyond making money. He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. Will you marry me? Let me be Tommy's father in every way that matters. Let me love both of you for the rest of my life. Tears filled Emma's eyes. Are you sure? I mean, I'm still just a former diner waitress with a juvie record. The society pages will have a field day. I've never been more sure of anything, Nathaniel said firmly, and I couldn't care less what the society pages say. I love you, Emma. Simple as that. A smile broke through her tears. Then yes. Yes. I'll marry you. Nathaniel slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. A small voice interrupted them. Does this mean I can call you Dad now? They turned to find Tommy standing in the doorway, grinning from ear to ear. How long have you been there, mister? Emma asked, wiping away happy tears. Long enough. Tommy ran to them, and Nathaniel lifted him up. So? Can I? Nathaniel looked at Emma, who nodded, her eyes shining. Nothing would make me prouder, Tommy, he told the boy. Nothing in the world. Tommy wrapped his arms around Nathaniel's neck. I knew it would work, he whispered. Knew? What would work? Emma asked. Tommy gave her a mischievous smile. My letter, I told you it was magic. Nathaniel laughed, pulling Emma close with his free arm, creating a circle of 3. The family none of them had expected to find, but all of them had needed. Outside the center, a banner fluttered in the breeze, bearing the words that had brought them together. The Carter Turner Family Foundation, because everyone deserves a second chance. And on Nathaniel's desk back at the office, in a simple frame next to family photos, was the letter that had started it all, a child's plea that had changed not just 2 lives, but 3. It had indeed been magic. The best kind of magic there is the magic of love, found in the most unexpected of places, beginning with the simple words, Dear Mr. Carter, I need a new daddy. The following day, as the community center filled with families and reporters, Nathaniel stood at the podium with Emma and Tommy beside him. A sea of faces looked back at them, people hopeful for the same second chance they had received. 6 months ago, Nathaniel began, a boy's letter found its way to my desk. It was a cry for help, but it became so much more. It became my salvation. He looked at Emma and Tommy with love. Today we open the doors of this center with a simple message. No one should have to face life's challenges alone. Emma stepped forward. As someone who once struggled to put food on the table for my son, I know how isolating poverty can be. This center isn't charity, it's community, it's hope. Tommy, dressed in his best clothes, added with perfect confidence, "And everyone deserves hope." The crowd erupted in applause. As the ribbon was cut and people streamed into the center, a reporter approached the family. "Mr. Carter, do you regret anything about the past 6 months? The board fight? The custody battle? The media attention?" Nathaniel looked at Emma, now his fiancée, and Tommy, soon to be officially his son. He thought about the empty life he'd led before them, filled with wealth but little joy. He thought about the courage it had taken for a small boy to write, to a stranger, and for a proud woman to accept help when she needed it most. Regrets? Nathaniel shook his head, smiling. Not a single one. Every struggle has led us here, to this moment, to this family. He took Emma's hand, the engagement ring, catching the light. Tommy slipped. Between them, one hand in each of theirs. Together they walked into the center, and into the future they would build, one day at a time. The headlines the next day read simply, "The letter that changed everything, how 3 lives became 1 family." And in homes across the city, other letters began to appear. Some from children, some from parents, all reaching out with the hope that they too might find the connection that had transformed Nathaniel Carter from a lonely billionaire into a happy family man. Because sometimes the most powerful magic comes from the simplest acts, like a child picking up a pencil and writing, "Dear Mr. Carter." The end.